The FN SCAR was supposed to be the next big thing in US military service rifles when it was first accepted for initial production and testing in 2007. Designed from the ground up to meet special operations needs, the SCAR quickly became an iconic series of rifles, equipping the US military's most elite teams like the Navy SEALs and Army Rangers. By 2010, it seemed like the SCAR was the preferred weapon. 9 out of 10 doctors approved, but only a year later, by late 2011, US Special Operations Command all of a sudden started canceling contracts. Then they dropped the 5.56 version of the SCAR entirely. In this episode, I interviewed former Army Ranger Marty Skovlin Jr., who actually deployed to Afghanistan with the SCAR, to find out what troops really thought of the weapon and why it might have gotten canned. Shooters have had this kind of love-hate relationship with the SCAR for many years. It was high up on the crazy hot scale, so it got away with a lot of controversial design choices. The weapon is now a mature platform and has been put through the combat paces in Ukraine. Belgium sent an unspecified number of the SCAR light rifles to Ukraine as part of its aid package worth 90 million euros. Its rugged durability has performed extremely well in the muddy trench warfare style conditions. This video shows soldiers literally pressure washing their SCAR rifles to clean the dirt off them before going straight back out into the field. The SCAR takes us through a transition period in US small arms development that has left a lasting impression on all next generation rifles being adopted across all the Western militaries. But what if you could have a mini non-firing FN SCAR on your shelf at home? I want to introduce you to the newest innovation from the miniature models over at Goat Guns, the FN SCAR. It was actually officially licensed through FN Herstal themselves. This is why the precision details are on a whole new level here, with the mil-spec dark tan color getting the seal of approval directly by the people at FN. If you're looking to spice up your desk or shelf at home with a weapon that is sure to spark debates, this is your absolute best option. Just like the real thing, the upper and lower receiver feature a slightly different tan. This model is extremely durable, made from die-cast metal, and assembles quickly by snapping the pieces into place in just 5 or 10 minutes, depending on what you scored on your ASVAB test. It ejects and cycles through dummy rounds that are included in each purchase. You can place an early access pre-order for your own non-firing mini FN SCAR by clicking the link in the description or my pinned comment below. Pre-ordering the SCAR means you'll get it 1 month before its official public release, so click the link in the description to check it out now. The SCAR's roots come from the early years of the global war on terror. US Special Forces reported their first problems with the M4 during initial combat experiences in Iraq and Afghanistan. For the first time, troops were facing extreme cold, high-altitude mountains, shooting at long ranges in one theater, while at the same time dealing with extreme heat and urban close-quarters combat in another. The M4 and M16 weren't designed for these kind of extreme environments, and rumors of reliability issues started to crop up with the M4. There were reports of sand jamming the bolt and barrels melting in the middle of combat during prolonged firefights. Personally, I think the M4 is an outstanding platform, but these were the complaints that were leveled against it that led to the development of the SCAR in the early 2000s. So US Special Operations Command issued an Operational Requirement Document, or ORD, in September 2003, calling for a new weapon series. It wasn't that simple though, because any quick fixes were complicated by the fact that each Special Forces component had different design features they wanted. Green Berets and Air Force pararescuemen wanted weapons that were lightweight and compact for extended foot patrols or jump worthiness. Navy SEALs, on the other hand, prioritized saltwater resistance, while Army Rangers just wanted weapons focused on rugged reliability. The Operations Requirement Document called for a weapon series that was modular enough to adapt to different mission sets in the field. Ideally, this one single weapon system could replace several older designs that were being used for different purposes. So you'd have the role of the M14, the M4, and the M249 all squeezed into one weapon. This would unite multiple battlefield roles into one rifle, and after a competition in 2004, it pitted 12 different prototypes from 9 different manufacturers against each other, and the SCAR platform designed by Belgian company FN Herstal was selected when their entry was the only submission to pass all of SOCOM's go, no-go testing criteria. The FN SCAR was chosen unanimously by the selection board and moved on to low-rate initial production testing. But what were some of the factors that made FN It seemed like the right choice at the time. FN Herstal was a natural fit for the contract because they had a strong track record and reputation for quality firearms production. Because of their strategic location in the Liège region of Belgium, this area has a long history of small arms production thanks to its rich coal deposits and high-quality steel factories that were created and were cropped up during the Industrial Revolution. In the 1980s, FN became well-positioned logistically for the US military when they took over part of the contract to make M16 and M4 rifles from Colt. They opened a new US-based factory located in Columbia, South Carolina, to make the rifles along with the M240 and M249 machine guns that were already the company's own homegrown designs. So FN already designed 2 of the US Army's primary infantry rifles, so they seemed like an obvious choice from a logistical standpoint to design an M4 replacement. By the early 2000s, FN was one of the largest exporters of military small arms in Europe, and this is why SOCOM ordered 1,800 SCAR rifles for low-rate initial production testing, with an accompanying 10-year contract to purchase an additional 15,000 of the light version of the SCAR and 6,000 of the heavy variants. The contract was finalized in 2007, but delays in production meant that the first rifles didn't actually reach operational units until 2009. Right around 2009, in that time frame is when we start to really see the hype around the SCAR ramp up. So many a futuristic Call of Duty loadout had a SCAR as its centerpiece, because at the same time the 75th Ranger Regiment was showing up at football games with the rifle. It's the rifle that says, "I'm not here to play Fortnite, I'm here to play Escape from Tarkov." An entire battalion of the 75th Rangers was being deployed to the Middle East with 600 SCAR light rifles to put the new weapon through its first large-scale operational test, and publicity was off the charts. If the SCAR was a stock at the time, it would be going through the moon.
What we were told at the time is we were the first unit to deploy to combat with the SCAR platform. At the time that we were doing this, I was one of the company armors, and so I, played a part as far as like reviewing all the surveys that were collected from everybody in the company. I think it was a combination of it was more accurate, I could choose my barrel length based on mission, and it was ambidextrous and highly compact with folding that buttstock down.
The SCAR didn't just look modern, it was the first weapon to popularize a lot of the features that we take for granted today, like monolithic upper rails for extended optics mounting, interchangeable barrel lengths for different missions, and free float rail systems with plenty of real estate for attachments while increasing accuracy. Thanks to SOCOM's requirements, the SCAR was produced in 2 primary variants and calibers. You had the SCAR L in 5.56 and the SCAR Heavy in 7.62. So you could see where each rifle might perform better, one in Afghanistan and one for Iraq. The original idea was the operators could select a barrel and swap out calibers easily. There was even a rumor of a behind the enemy lines concept that would allow operators to use enemy 7.62 rounds with a conversion kit, so if they ran out of ammo, they could just pick up the enemy's rounds. The conversion kits were cancelled though. The SCAR series was highly praised for accuracy, right? It achieved a sub-minute of angle accuracy when using match-grade ammo. So this meant that 5 rounds would fit into a 1-inch circle at 100 yards. That level of accuracy is incredible, considering this is a production fully automatic rifle with an interchangeable barrel held in place by just 6 screws. The SCAR L is considered effective out to 600 meters, which is like 200 extra meters compared to the M4, while the heavy version pushes out to 800 meters. Reliability testing of the SCAR also showed it to be better than the M4 that it was supposed to replace. Out of 6,000 rounds shot in a brutal adverse environment test, the SCAR series had 226 malfunctions, while the M4 had a whopping 882 malfunctions during this same test. This reliability comes down to some key design choices FN made when building the SCAR. First, it was given a lot of empty space within the receiver for the heavy bolt to push dirt and debris out of the way. Second, the short stroke gas piston keeps heat and carbon fouling away from the bolt and chamber. Third, the easily adjustable gas system makes shooting with sound suppressors a better experience. Sound suppressors typically add a lot of extra back pressure on a rifle due to the way they trap gas at the muzzle, so the SCAR's gas piston design doesn't transfer all of that hot gas and smoke straight into the shooter's face. This isn't only uncomfortable for the shooter, but also heats up and softens the working parts of the rifle, reducing its service life. While the SCAR Light and Heavy were designed and built in tandem, their performance and service histories diverged in 2011. The weapons were mostly living up to the hype, but there was some early teething issues holding them back. The Mark 16 had the distinction of creating a brand new class of malfunction never seen before. It was particularly vulnerable to double and triple feed malfunctions from bad magazines.
The other big thing that we noticed is, and I've seen other people before on the internet talk about like, oh, there was this stoppage problem with the SCAR. It wasn't the SCAR itself, it was the magazine. If you were using PMags, we found out that PMags did not work very well with the SCAR, that you wanted to use that issued steel magazine that they issued with the rifle. And those, it was almost flawless operation.
Camera. So before we were able to fire around, already there's a double feed that we're going to try to clear this malfunction. There we go.
All the extra space above the bolt and carrier assembly, ironically, could make the weapon less reliable, as extra rounds from a multi-feed malfunction went straight up into the enlarged recesses built for the operating rod. US Army Special Forces veteran Jeff Gurwitch said he saw a squadmate with 4 empty casings stuck in his FN SCAR's chamber. What's next, an octuplet feed error? Another problem was actually caused by SOCOM itself and quickly turned into the SCAR's most controversial feature. In the requirements drawn up, someone involved in the drafting was convinced a reciprocating charging handle was key to the weapon's reliability. This means that when each round is fired, the charging handle moves back and forth with the bolt instead of staying fixed in place like on the M4. The thought process behind this was a soldier could use the charging handle with a forward assist, pushing a gummed up bolt into battery with a quick slap. Since this was a hardline requirement from SOCOM itself, the engineers at FN couldn't just drop the idea and were forced to compromise. Rangers who deployed with the weapon complained about this awkward reciprocating charging handle, which always got caught on their own kit or on terrain. This type of top-down design requirement were stopped shortly after the SCAR development, and we saw the addition of what's called soldier touch points to prevent this kind of error from slipping by in the future, because you had your average soldiers who would test the weapons first. Retired Special Forces Major Weston Amaya recalls how much of an issue this reciprocating charging handle was by saying, quote, "A lot of times when you find yourself in a firefight, you take cover behind whatever you can, and sometimes it's in an awkward position or it's in a very small cover, and you find yourself manipulating your rifle into a position that is less than ideal to fire from." FN addressed these early issues, but these new variants took time to produce and ship out to the soldiers. But the damage to its reputation was already done. The first impression of the SCAR left a bad taste in the mouth. The Rangers' overall experience in 2009 was best summed up by one review that stated, quote, "The SCAR's a good system, but I'm not ready to give up my M4. As the SCAR evolves over the next couple of years, it'll be a top-of-the-line rifle. I'm not convinced that it's worth the cost to purchase and train on a completely new system." Tight military budgets started to arrive after the withdrawal from Iraq in 2011. SOCOM was forced to ask if the Mark 16 FN SCAR was really worth sticking with at all. The Spec Op budget began leveling off between 2008 and 2012 as the global economic crisis took its toll, even seeing a cut of almost $1 billion in base budget during 2011. While these shortfalls were made up through supplemental spending measures, it meant SOCOM was having to make tough choices during this time period about how to keep the lights on.
Do you have any sense of why maybe, I think it was in 2013 that the Rangers finally just completely dropped it from their inventory? Or do you have any
sense? It was immediately in 2010. We returned from that deployment and they were like, hey, box up the SCAR lights. You can keep the SCAR heavies, you're going back to M4s. It was just like in order. Like there wasn't a lot of conversation about it. I'll have to be intentionally vague here, and I wish I could be more journalistic about this. And I ended up at a bar one time with a guy who worked at Crane, who oversaw all weapons for, naval special warfare and really all of SOCOM. I'm like, so, what the dude? Like, what happened? He basically vaguely said, like, it was politics more than anything else. As far as the reliability of the SCAR, I firmly do believe that, again, if the choice is between the SCAR and the M4s that we had at the time, the SCAR was the clearly superior firearm. No bad guys got away because the SCAR didn't perform, we'll put it that way.
The SCAR light was still more accurate and more reliable than the M4, but not by enough to justify the increased cost. SOCOM canceled all purchase orders of the 5.56 version of the SCAR in June 2010, with only 850 rifles delivered. There just wasn't enough money to go around, and SOCOM decided their operators would be better served by investing in other capabilities like more optics or better surveillance and communications technologies. But the SOP Mod Block 2 upgrades for the M4 series had arrived by now, giving the M4 some of the same overall capabilities. While the sun set on the Mark 16 as part of the SOCOM's grand plan to outfit all special operators with the new rifle, individual branches of the special operations community still have the option of purchasing the Mark 16 under their own budget. The SEALs, for instance, still use the Mark 16 likely because it has superior corrosion and adverse environment resistance, so it's worth the extra cost for their missions that deal with water. The SCAR Heavy, though, is a much different story. It went on a very different development path. Adopted as the Mark 17, the SCAR Heavy didn't have the same problems with multi-feed malfunctions due to the bigger cartridges not getting stuck in the weird space within the gun. The Mark 17 is actually lighter than most other 7.62 rifles that it was meant to replace, while at the same time having less felt recoil. I don't know how FN broke physics to make that happen, since a lighter gun is supposed to have more recoil. There was a lot of cases where teams would have to shoot from mountain ridge to mountain ridge or across valleys and canyons over 500 meters. The 5.56 round in the M4 loses a lot of its power at that range. Even though defeating enemy body armor wasn't much of an issue for operators in the War on Terror, the bigger bullet was a lot more powerful in punching through barriers and unarmored vehicles. This was a huge advantage in the age of vehicle-borne IEDs. I have a theory that it could be the lessons learned from Special Forces experience with the Mark 17 FN SCAR that might have been a factor in why the Army decided to go with this even higher performance 6.8x51 cartridge in the upcoming XM7 rifle. The SCAR may have initially been built for the US military, but FN Hersel has been looking to international markets, and SCAR rifles have expanded to serve within over 20 different countries. Over 55% of the company's annual income comes from military sales, and the SCAR is one of its best-selling items. France placed a €100 million order for 2,620 of the precision rifle variants of the SCAR Heavy. Belgium, where FN Herstal is based, uses both the heavy and light versions as their standard service rifles. Meanwhile, Kenya in Africa has plans to make the SCAR Heavy their standard rifle as well, with 1,000 already in service. Longer service life on parts means less money spent on repairs, and there are examples of SCAR rifles in US military service with over 200,000 rounds put through them. That's like how many miles is in my car right now. So FN Herstal charges a premium for the SCAR series, right? At between $1,300 and $3,000, it's one of the most expensive rifles on the market. Yet hardly any weapon has both the hype and street credit that the SCAR series has earned over the past 15 years. Even as other, newer guns get their 15 minutes of fame, the SCAR's future actually seems pretty bright. The FN SCAR is here to stay, and its record of accuracy, versatility, and dependability is sure to see it attracting new customers across the world.
Woo. That one got me.
I also want to give a huge thank you to everyone at the Heritage Guild shooting range in Easton, Pennsylvania. We had a blast while we were there. If you found something valuable in this video, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button. I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy, and check out one of these two videos while you're here if you have another minute. Thank you.